have to admit, I had to read it twice to be sure that I wasn't hallucinating. When a superpower publishes a document that reads like a villain's monologue in a bad movie, it's almost funny, almost, but then you realize, no, they're actually completely serious. The United States has just put in writing what most countries only dare whisper sometimes, a manifesto of global dominance, arrogance, and strategic threats. When I finished reading it, I just kind of sat there for a moment, letting the absurdity sink in. Sometimes the world really is stranger than satire. Today we're diving into America's newly released National Security Strategy, a document that doesn't just reveal policy but spells it out in black and white why the rest of the world should be on edge. We'll see how allies are reduced to useful tools, why economic power has become the new frontline, and what actually happens when a country writes its threats down like commandments. But the thing is, if we only focus on America, we miss the bigger story in my opinion. Every major power plays this game, some louder, some quieter. So throughout this video, I'll be drawing quick comparisons to China, Russia, the EU, and others, not to let anyone off the hook, but because seeing the pattern helps us think more clearly in general. It's easy to get caught up in this outrage, but it's far more interesting and more useful, in my opinion, to see how these strategies echo and clash around the world as well. We'll look at how this document redefines friendship, the quiet coercion behind economic alliances, and the deeper psychology at work when a superpower can't let go of its own reflection. Most of all, we're going to ask, what does it mean for ordinary people when global strategy becomes a zero-sum game? So let me ask you directly, if you found out your country was being treated not as a friend but as a pawn in somebody else's grand plan, how would you want your leaders to respond? I'm especially interested in viewers from Canada and Europe. Drop your thoughts in the comments if you like. Do you feel the pressure to pick a side, or is there another path perhaps? Just a quick personal note, my new book Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Soft-Lies is finally out in the world now. It's more than just a guide to thinking more clearly. It's about finding calm and clarity in a world that keeps getting louder. If you've ever felt like I do, worn down by the noise and knee-jerk opinions and want practical ways to think things through, especially under pressure, I think you'll find it valuable. Or if you know somebody who could use that kind of support right now, it might actually make a thoughtful Christmas gift. There's also a 24-minute companion podcast that walks through the key ideas, plus a launch video and a special discount for subscribers, all linked down below. And one more thing, maybe you didn't know, but I'm a computer scientist and I have a PhD in the field. I'm working on a new course all about AI fluency, essentially making sense of the technology that's shaping the next decade. If you're interested in this space and want to help guide what I build, I'd love to have your input. There's a quick 8-question survey, just a couple of minutes to fill out, and your thoughts will directly influence the content that I build next. The links to everything are below. It would mean so much to hear from you. Thank you for listening, but now let's get back into it. Let's just start with the language here because it actually says a lot. In this shiny new US national security document, the word ally pops up exactly once when it comes to Canada, and honestly, it's not even a compliment. The message, if you squint past the diplomatic polish, is actually pretty simple. Alliances are not about trust or shared values or any of that warm fuzzy stuff. It's actually just about usefulness, quite transactional, right? Basically, if you're on America's list, your job is to help keep the machine running. No debates, no questions, just here's what we need, make it happen. And if you're not on that list, well, you've been upgraded or maybe downgraded to either a problem or a threat. What really stands out is just how direct all of this is. There's not even a hint of subtlety. They literally write, we must encourage Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, Canada, Mexico, but not to work together or build something new. No. The whole point is to adopt trade policies that hit China where it hurts. There's actually something almost weirdly honest about it. I mean, most empires throughout history at least pretend to care about their friends. They send fruit baskets, they host summits, they do the song and dance, but here, the mask is completely off. Canada gets a passing mention, but only as an extra set of hands in America's campaign to keep China in check, as if. Honestly, it's the kind of approach that punishes both emotional thinking and apathy. If you treat your partners like tools, eventually they're just going to figure it all out. And when that happens, just don't be surprised if they start quietly looking for the exit. Now, just to compare with how other big players do this, China, they love to throw around phrases like win-win partnerships, like everyone's going to walk away happy and richer. Russia, it's all about brotherhood and shared destiny. Sure, a lot of that is just for show and everyone knows it, but at least the tone is different, right? America has completely dropped the act. For people on the receiving end, especially in places like Canada and Europe, The message is super loud and clear. You're here to serve, not to steer. I always think that a good critical thinker doesn't just ask what happened, but who benefits from you reacting a certain way. There's a reason here that the language is so sharp, my friends. Now here's where things really start to feel theatrical in my opinion, like we're watching some kind of blame game unfold in slow motion. According to this document, if a country managed to succeed outside the official American playbook, well, the only possible explanation is that they must have cheated. China's huge economically, definitely cheating. German companies setting up shop in China, dangerous and suspicious. And when it comes to Europe's economic struggles, apparently it's not about global shifts or competition. No, it's those pesky regulations that, in other words, stifle creativity. It actually gets a bit surreal if you stop and think about it. The US points fingers at Europe for losing its share of global GDP, but you'll notice there is no mention of America's own drop from about 40% in the 1960s to just last quarter today. When America loses ground, it's the result of sabotage. When Europe does, it's all their own fault. The double standard here, my friends, it's almost impressive in how blatant it is, even for geopolitics. And then there's the chapter on China. Honestly, it reads more like a laundry list of grievances. China is unbalanced, China is cheating, and apparently China needs to be rebalanced, but not through negotiation or competition, just through sheer force. There's even a whiff of moral outrage. How dare they lift 1 billion people out of poverty and then try to sell affordable products to other poor countries? The nerve, right? It would almost be funny if it weren't so serious. Now, just to compare that with the rest of the global heavyweights, you zoom out and you see this exact same move all over the place. Russia, anytime they hit a rough patch, it's always blamed on Western sabotage. China, the standard line is that America is just trying to contain them, hold them back, keep them boxed in. I mean, now basically America just confessed to that, no? There always has to be an enemy at the gate, right? But what's kind of unique about America's approach this time is just how certain all of it sounds. It's not just about protecting interest, it's about defending their destiny. It's one of those moments where if you want to see clearly, you have to be able to hold two conflicting ideas at once. Yes, every superpower runs this playbook, but some versions are a lot more self-serving and a lot more out in the open than others. Next, here is where things get a little bit closer to home, not just for Canadians or Europeans, but honestly for just anyone outside of Washington, basically. America's grand strategy is not just about tanks, flags, or treaties anymore. It's more about who controls the supply chains, who gets the rare earth minerals, who owns the trade routes, and bizarrely, who gets blamed for the narcotics. If your country happens to have something the US wants, minerals, oil, even just a port in the right place, congratulations, you're in the crosshairs. There's this one line in the document that really stuck. The United States must protect and defend our economy and our people from harm from any country or source. Fair enough. On the surface, it sounds pretty reasonable. Of course, a country wants to look after itself, right? But when you step back and realize what that actually means in practice, any country that even slightly threatens America's economic interest is just fair game. An ant on the road. And if you look at how broad their interests are, that could basically end up being just about everyone. For Canada, that's not just some abstract risk, it's literally direct. Say you want to build a pipeline to ship oil to China instead of the US, suddenly you're a threat to critical resources. Or let's say Canada decides to diversify exports, maybe even just runs a few ads that don't totally fit the American narrative, like we had recently. Next thing you know, the trade doors are slamming shut, basically as they did. And it's not only about resources either, my friends. There's this bit about protecting against propaganda and cultural subversion as well, which, let's be honest, could mean absolutely anything they want it to mean. Whether it's Ontario's running a tourism campaign or some story about fentanyl, any excuse can be picked up and weaponized for economic pressure. Just to compare with how this plays out for the others, Europe actually gets pretty much the same treatment, but there's this extra layer of disdain. If German companies build factories in China, suddenly it's called disloyal. If Canada tries to put its own interests first, that's subversive. Meanwhile, when American companies like Tesla, for example, build giant plants in China, that's called just good business. It's almost poetic in its absurdity, isn't it, if it wasn't so obviously one-sided. Honestly, this is just the logic of empire, all the polite fiction stripped away. It's a good reminder why critical thinking is actually so essential in this kind of environment, when every excuse can be weaponized and every narrative is up for grabs. It pays to actually step back, get perspective, and try to see the full pattern. That's really what I talk about in Awake, not just what's happening, but how to stay grounded and alert, even as the stories keep changing. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I'd love it if you subscribe. The House of L is a community of thoughtful, curious people, and you're very welcome here. Let's just pause for a second and really pull back. Where does this whole mindset actually come from? Why is it that a superpower, any superpower by the way, but especially the US, feels the need to broadcast its fears, its insecurities, and its ambitions all at once, as if it can't decide which one is louder? America's story is not just about raw power, it's really about anxiety as well. From the first day an American kid sets foot in a school, the message is clear. Be safe, stay alert, threats are everywhere, the world is out to get you, so only strength can protect you. It's essentially a society living in a kind of ongoing contradiction. There's this intense pride, almost a belief in their own myth, but underneath that is a real need for constant reassurance. And you see that contradiction everywhere, my friends, in foreign policy, in the way schools are run, in debates over healthcare, a country where if you're poor, the message is essentially you get what you can afford. If you're rich, the world is yours for the taking. Universal healthcare, suddenly, well, that's dangerous. Gun ownership is sacred, untouchable. Criticism is instantly suspicious. If you look at it that way, this national security document is not a weird outlier. It's actually just a mirror. It reflects the collective fears, ambitions, and honestly, a whole lot of cognitive dissonance, in my opinion, from a country that can't picture a world where it isn't number one. In that mindset, you can understand how every rival would be automatically labeled a cheater, every supposed ally is treated as a subordinate, and every independent thought is seen as a threat. Here's where I think we all have to step back and reflect, not just on what's being said, but on what it actually costs us, mentally and emotionally, to keep believing it. What do we trade away for that sense of certainty, right? That's what makes critical thinking so important. It's not just about being cynical, but about seeing the hidden price tags attached to all of these stories we're being sold. And honestly, the more I study these patterns, the more I think that staying awake, really awake, is less about picking sides and far more about noticing when the whole script just doesn't add up anymore. So here we are, reading in black and white what was always whispered behind closed doors. America's national security strategy is less a roadmap and more a warning label, not just for enemies, but for the rest of us as well. The empire is speaking plainly now, and the world will just have to decide how to listen and what to do about it. If we just return to that question from earlier, if you knew your country was just a piece on somebody else's chessboard, what would you actually do? Resist? Adapt? Pretend not to notice? Sometimes the only real act of defiance is to see things clearly and to refuse to let somebody else's script become your own. To think critically is to see the play, not just the actors. To remember that every grand narrative is also a bid for your loyalty, your anger, your fear. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, if you want to understand how to navigate the noise, the hype, and the complexity of a current moment, I think you'd really enjoy my book. It's called Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Soft Lies. And it's written for people who want to stay grounded, think clearly, and live in reality, even when the world makes them feel impossible. I've now included a 24-minute podcast episode where we unpack some of the ideas behind Awake in a more relaxed, conversational way. Perfect if you prefer to listen while walking, driving, or just taking a break from screens. You'll find the link down below. I'd love to know what you think of it. As always, thank you so much for being here and for thinking through these questions with me. If you like the conversation, do consider subscribing for more, and don't forget to check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive. Until next time, stay awake and stay curious.